Hello, my name is Ken Williams. This is Module 4, Psychological Interactions at Aspen University, and today I'll be talking about consultant responses. This week's module gave us two case scenarios in which the consultee met with two consultants, and I'll be analyzing and assessing the consultant responses and then determining which one I think is most effective, and also the type of consultation that I would implement if faced with these exact same scenarios. So in the first scenario, the consultee meets with two consultants, and she explains that she is a supervisor of 7 supervisees and that her job has become draining and difficult because her supervisees have individual agendas, and due to their lack of teamwork and not being on the same page, her job has become draining and stressful. And so the first consultant really takes an empathetic approach and explains to her that her job is very difficult and that her supervisees just seem to not understand how difficult her job is trying to manage them when they show lack of teamwork. And then the second consultee takes more of a direct approach and tells her, after listening to her for 10 minutes, that the problem is her lack of assertiveness and that her supervisees have grown to not respect her. And if she is more assertive, she could reclaim their respect. And so my take on the effectiveness of both responses is really comes down to where the consultant and the consultee is in their relationship. And to me, it's not black or white, because I do think that the second consultant did provide more of a solution-based response, basically telling her, hey, here's the problem. If you implement this, this can be corrective to the problem. And I really think that that long-term is the most effectiveness, but it doesn't mean that it's the most effective response at the moment. Basically, I really factor in the effectiveness of each response, whether it be the solution response or the response that addresses the problem and gives a solution to the problem, or the response that's more empathetic but does not offer a solution or does not offer analysis of the problem. I really think that if the relationship is new, if the consultant has not gained the trust of the consultee, giving her such a direct response early in the relationship without showing that empathetic side could be something that is rejected and may not ultimately be effective at this particular stage of their relationship. So if it's very new in the beginning stages of the relationship, the more empathetic response may be the most effective in building the relationship. If the relationship is long standing, if the consultant has already gained trust from the consultee, then I believe that the second response is the most effectiveness, addressing the problem or analyzing the problem and then providing a solution to the problem. And so really, I think long term, the second consultee provided the most effective response, but it may not be the most effective response at the moment based on where they are in their relationship. And so the way I would handle this situation is I would really analyze where we are in the relationship. At the beginning, the very beginning of the relationship, I will probably incorporate a more of an empathetic response. And then I also think that it's important to analyze where the consultee is. If in this particular situation, if the supervisor is in a real vulnerable state, almost near the breaking point, seems to be extremely passive, and maybe being assertive is not really a part of her genetic being or just a part of her personality type, it may be a building process to get her to being more assertiveness. It may take a couple steps prior. So I would really take the more empathetic response at the beginning based on where the supervisee is, based on her personality, and also where we are in the building blocks of our relationship. If we're strong in a relationship, if we have established a long-standing consultant-consultee interaction partnership, then I would take the more direct response. And ultimately, I think working up to the second consultant's response is really the main factor, or really the main point that I try to get to, really trying to work up to that. So I do think that the second consultee addressed the problem and provided a response, or provided something that's more solution focused, that, hey, this is what needs to happen. If you're more assertiveness, you'll gain their respect. And so I think that ultimately that's where I would want to work up to. And that will be the response that I will give after we've established a relationship, after we've built trust, and after we've gone through those progressive steps to get the supervisee to a place where she's comfortable being more assertive. But as of right now, depending on, really my response is depending on where they are in the relationship, and depending on what is the consultee's personality type. And if she's not an assertive person by nature, which it appears that this may be the case, then I would believe that working her up to that point would be the best solution. But ultimately, I think the most effective response long-term is the second consultant's response. So in the second scenario, it talks about a school counselor, who in this place is the consultee, meets with two consultants to talk about a student named Madison. And that Madison cries a lot, or easily cries, in that the school counselor believes that she may be experiencing something traumatic at home. And so when she meets with the two consultants, the first consultant takes more of a investigative approach. And the second consultant says, tell me a little more about what you're seeing. And when she meets with the second consultant, the second consultant says, or makes this question or a statement, or this could be a question, I believe: what time is the next faculty meeting? This one is a little bit difficult because the second consultant, and I'll jump right to the second consultant, leaves the question she asks up to interpretation, basically asking what time is the next faculty meeting. That's up to interpretation of why that question is being asked. Does the consultant want to attend the faculty meeting? Do they want to provide a little bit more information, or gather a little bit more information before the faculty meeting? So that question is up to interpretation of why that was asked. As far as the first consultant, I think that response is more effective at the moment because it's more of an investigative approach, meaning that to develop the best solution to the problem, you have to get as much information about the problem as possible. And so by asking the consultee, what is she seeing? She's able to investigate and dig a little bit more deeper of what's the pattern, what's the history behind what you're seeing. Have you saw this in the past? How has this progressed? Where was it at the beginning to where it is now? So it digs a little bit more deeper. And so in order to get the most effective, the most appropriate response, you need that investigative questioning to just kind of get a full picture of what's happening and the history behind it. So I think at this time, that response is the most effective. Now, that doesn't mean that the second consultant's response is not effective, or could be the most effective, simply because there's no context behind it at the moment. I think that when we, in the text explains this, that most consultees don't fully implement the solution that is developed in the consultant-consultee partnership. And so most interventions aren't followed through. And so what happens is that the integrity of the intervention falls through because most consultees don't follow through. And so let's say, for example, that Madison is crying because her parents are in the middle of a divorce. And so the consultant and consultee come up with a solution of, hey, let's put Madison in counseling 3 days a week. And let's say that the consultee or this counselor does not follow through with meeting with Madison 3 times a week to just talk about. That means that the integrity of the intervention has fallen through. And so most consultants would want to be a part of those meetings just to make sure we have this on record. I was here. And so when the terms of the intervention are agreed to during the next family staffing, that there's a second party there to hold accountability, that the integrity of the intervention remains intact. And so ultimately, if we kind of determine, leaving this up to interpretation, if we determine that this is possibly the reason why this question was asked, and I'm just going to kind of go on off here, just assuming, if this is the reason why this question is asked, and this will be the most effective approach, because that means that regardless of what is done or what is agreed upon, if there's no follow through, if there's no integrity with the intervention, then even the investigative part means nothing if there's no follow through on context for the second consultee's reasoning for asking the question. I think at this point, I would take the response of the first consultee just being more investigative. But then again, it determines where they are in the relationship. If that stage has already been surpassed, then the second consulting asking what time is the next faculty meeting because they want to be present is the most effective response. So at this point, I would take the first consultant, the investigative approach, as the most effective right now, but determining based on what the context is for the second consultee, that may ultimately in the end be the most effective response.